A few weeks ago, my wife was antique shopping and she stumbled upon something that she thought that I might enjoy. So my phone goes bing, and I am presented with the following. She followed up those texts with, "Is this something you think you'd be interested in?" And I, of course, said, "Abso-freaking-lutely." Offer him $50. $42 later, she comes home with this and this. There was not a ding, a dent, a mar, a scratch, a crack, or anything wrong with it. Even has a lockup, I would say a good solid 8.4. 10 minutes after I have it in my hot little hands, I've polished the absolute hell out of it. It's perfect. I go to test the edge. It's factory sharp, meaning duller than hell. So out to the garage. 5 minutes later, it is screaming, shaven sharp. It is so perfect that I thought, you know what? I'm never going to carry this. Now, I'm not 100% convinced that the one that I bought when I was a teenager was lost in a move or was self-gifted to somebody who saw it. It's a rather heavy knife. It's heavier than a buck 110. The handle is larger, meaning there is more brass. Everything about the handle is larger. There's just more of this than this. I can even feel it. The overall length of both of these knives is identical. This has more handle, little less blade, little less handle, little more blade. No biggie. You wouldn't even really notice it unless you were holding them side by side. When I was 16, I thought it was time for me to have a proper knife. I'd always been carrying around a small Boy Scout knife, and it was okay, but I wanted something else. Saw this in a sporting goods store. A small mom and pop operation said, I would like one of those. And I think it was $32, and I was out the door. I'm pretty sure that Schrade had a hierarchy of quality and finish on their knives. I think it went from old timer being at the bottom, because those are pretty rough. Then you just had the regular Schrade, and that's what I had. I had the regular Schrade LB7, and the blade was stamped as such. And then there was the Uncle Henry, a little finer grade, made in the USA, probably in the 80s. The same time this was made. This was 1981. The Buck 110 came out in 1964. I do not know exactly when the Schrade came out, but it's 100% a blatant copy of the 110. And it doesn't seem to bother Buck, for whatever reason. They're still making them and making money on them. Not only was the knife in perfect condition, just dirty and tarnished, the sheath was the same. Perfect condition. No marks on it, no cuts, not worn out. This thing hasn't even been on a belt. As much as I'd like to carry this knife, it would be kind of stupid because I do something to lose this or break it. I'm not wanting to wait another 40 years before I get another one. God, I'd be 100 something. And, you know, by then, I just really shouldn't be handling cutlery. When you have these two knives side by side, you really start to notice a couple of things. The first being the Schrade, the external components, the fit and finish, much more attention to detail, much nicer, higher quality, better all around. The only thing that you'll see is, well, this is that diamond wood, packle wood, whatever you want to call it, whereas these are ebony. Points for Buck for having ebony, but for the flush finish of all the rivets and the lock bar pin and the blade pivot pin, points to Schrade. If you look at the butt of both of these knives, you'll notice that the Schrade is faceted. It has 3 different surfaces, one here, one here, one here. Same thing with the flip side, one here, one here, one here. And also, where the lock bar recess is, that is 2 different surfaces, a surface there and a flat surface. Everything on the Buck is just rounded. They're cranking these things out at light speed, so you got to figure not everything's going to be quite the attention to detail. Now, let's talk about the blade. You can see that the blade's basically the same shape. However, if you look closely at the tip, you will notice that the Schrade is much thicker, the Buck is very thin, And probably one of the reasons why a lot of people complain about the buck, they're breaking the tips off of these knives. Let's say you are skinning out a deer. This is a great skinner. You start getting around joints, ribs, hip bones, that sort of stuff, and you move wrong, you might break a tip. You're not breaking this tip off. You know, I don't remember my other Schrade being quite this fat, but I'm actually glad this one's thick. The overall thickness of the stock in the Schrade is a little thinner than the stock in the buck. Not a whole hell of a lot, but a little bit. Both are made out of stainless steel. Back in the day, this was 440C. These are 440A. How do I know that? I talked to a guy that used to be a muckety-muck at Schrade, and he not only told me the reason behind the Schrade demise, and a fun fact that sometimes when they ran out of one particular steel in some of the line, they would just throw in whatever. So knives that usually would come with stainless steel, there might be a carbon steel blade in there. I haven't ever come across one of those, but supposedly they are out there. Now the fit and finish of the components of the knife. These are very rough. You look inside one of these things and you're going to see grind lines, you're going to see slag, you're going to see scratches, you're going to see inconsistent grinds at an angle, all kinds of stuff. Kind of grindy when you open and close. Not true with a buck. Everything's finished, polished, maybe even tumbled at some point. You look inside, everything's even. A lot more finishing goes into the internal components of one of these knives than they did with this. These were assembled by guys who were just trying to mate up lock bars to blades, doing the best they can. I've never come across one of these that has a lockup of a 10. With the buck, even this 1981, that is a 10. Maybe a 10 and a half. Quick lesson on what happened to Schrade. One time when I was traveling somewhere in upstate New York, I stumbled upon Canal Street Cutlery, and I thought, you know what? Wait a minute. Weren't they out of business for a while? But I went in, and I managed to talk to the owner. The owner had been a muckety-muck at Schrade. He was trying to resurrect the Canal Street brand. He was using Craftsman from Schrade and the old Canal Street. Well, all of these guys were older, and I didn't see any young talent in there. And that's a bad sign, because these old guys are going to retire, and there's no one to take up the slack or the craft. Unfortunately, they have since closed their doors. That's a sad day when a knife company has to close its doors. Back in the late 70s, I believe, Schrade was in all your Walmarts. Walmart was growing. Schrade was happy with this arrangement, and it looked like unicorns and rainbows for them for ever and ever. Amen. That clearly was a pipe dream. Walmart can be an evil, evil company, and what happens is they get you locked in, and you're making stuff for them, and you're also still making stuff for your independent dealers. The small mom and pop sporting goods stores, hardware stores, they're still selling your knives, okay? So, hypothetically, this is a $50 knife. Walmart decides we're going to sell it for $45. Okay, that's not a big deal. Then Schrade says, all right, we're going to start selling these knives for $35. But we're not going to pay the same amount that we were paying before when we were selling them for $45. Here's their margin. This is what they're selling it for. This is what they're buying it from Schrade for. They decide to sell it for $35. That doesn't mean Walmart's going to take a hit. That means Schrade's going to take a hit. They have to sell the knife for less to Walmart. Well, okay, we can sell it for a little bit less. We'll still make them for you. Walmart lowers the price again. Schrade again has to lower the amount that they're selling it to Walmart for. Now their margins are really starting to suck. Walmart does it again. Schrade has to do it again. It finally gets to the point at Schrade where the bean counters go, oh, holy shit. We're losing money on every knife that we sell to Walmart. We can't do that. So they had to stop selling to Walmart. Okay, that's fine. Well, what's happened in the meantime, you've devalued this knife. It's now a $30 knife. It's not a $50 knife. Well, all the mom and pop places, they can't sell them for $50. They got to sell them for $30. It probably cost them $30. It's at this point where the mom and pop places go, we're going to carry buck Screw you, Schrade. So Schrade had no customer base anymore. That was a wrap. End of story. Close the doors. And now it is time for a drinky poo.
Cheers, genitals.
Thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. I'll see you next time.